Rassie ERASMUS has had enough, the Springbok mastermind, usually measured and calculated in his public statements. Couldn't hide his frustration after watching another one of his locks receive a red card in consecutive weekends. This time it was Franco Mostert who got his marching orders against Italy in Turin, following Lou D. Jager's controversial dismissal against France just 7 days earlier. And the coach's message was crystal clear. Something needs to change in how rugby is officiating head contact, especially when it involves the tallest players on the field. The situation is becoming a serious problem for the Springboks. 2 locks sent off in 2 weeks, both for high contact, both in situations where the players were already as low as they could physically go. It's a coaching nightmare, and ERASMUS laid it all out in his post-match comments. His frustration wasn't aimed at the referees themselves, but at the system, at the laws, at the impossible standards being set for players who stand 2 meters tall or more. Let's break down what happened. Against Italy, Mostert was shown a straight red card in the 11th minute for a dangerous tackle on Paolo Garbisi. The referee, James Dolman, reviewed it with his TMO and decided it warranted a full dismissal rather than a yellow card or a 20-minute red card. The Springboks were forced to play nearly 80 minutes with 14 men, and they still won the match, but that's beside the point. The bigger issue is the pattern that's emerging. And it's one that has ERASMUS deeply concerned. When ERASMUS faced the media after the Italy match, he didn't hold back. He started by acknowledging the reality of the situation, saying it is what it is, and that what he says won't make a difference. But then he got to the heart of the matter. He expressed gratitude for having experienced officials like Ben O'Keefe on the assistant referee line and an experienced referee in Dolman, because with all the noise coming through the referee microphone, it was difficult to follow the match. That tells you everything about how chaotic the situation was, how much the red card dominated the conversation, and how it overshadowed what should have been a straightforward test match. But here's where ERASMUS really drove his point home. He talked about how his coaching staff and players pride themselves on going lower in tackles, on avoiding head contact, on doing everything right from a technique standpoint. Yet they've now lost to locks into games for not going lower than they physically can. And he asked the question that's at the center of this whole debate. How are they supposed to coach these guys to go any lower? How is a player who's 2 meters tall, or 2.06 meters tall like some of his locks, supposed to get lower than a player who's already on his knees? It's a fair question, and it's one that World Rugby needs to answer. ERASMUS pointed out that the Springboks don't know how to coach their forwards any differently. They're already drilling technique, already emphasizing low body positions, already doing everything by the book. But when the opposition player is falling or already low to the ground, or changing height at the last second, what's the tall lock supposed to do? Teleport, phase through solid matter. It's physically impossible. And that's what has ERASMUS so frustrated. He mentioned that he always thought rugby was moving toward 20-minute red cards, where a player could be replaced after 20 minutes instead of leaving his team a man down for the entire match. His system has been trialed in some competitions and has generally been well received because it balances player safety with the spectacle of the game. A team still gets punished for dangerous play, but the entire match isn't ruined by a single incident. Yet here we are, still seeing permanent red cards for incidents that many in the rugby community consider borderline at best. The impact on individuals is what really stings for ERASMUS. He talked about how unfair it is on people like Sia Khaleesi, the captain, who has now had to be substituted early into consecutive matches because of red cards. Khaleesi earned his 100th test cap against France, a milestone that should have been celebrated throughout the entire match. Instead, he was forced off at halftime to accommodate tactical changes after D. Jager's dismissal. Then it happened again against Italy, with Khaleesi making way in the second half after Mostert's red card for a player of Khaleesi's stature and importance, missing significant portions of 2 major test matches through no fault of his own is a bitter pill to swallow. Ben-Jason Dixon is another casualty of this situation. The flanker was playing his first test of the season against Italy, finally getting his chance after waiting patiently for an opportunity. But he had to be sacrificed early when Mostert was sent off and Ruan Nortje needed to come on to run the lineout. Dixon's big moment was cut short, not because of anything he did wrong, but because the team needed to reshuffle after losing a lock. That's the ripple effect of these red cards. It's not just about the player who gets sent off, it's about the captain who has to come off, the replacement who has to be sacrificed, the game plan that has to be thrown out the window, and the momentum that gets completely disrupted. Erasmus was careful not to criticize the officials directly. He said multiple times that he's not saying the calls were wrong, that he saw other high shots in the game that didn't receive the same punishment, but that he wasn't criticizing anyone. He acknowledged that once they reviewed the game tape, they might come to a different conclusion and see that they were totally wrong, in which case they would have to rectify their approach. But you could hear the frustration in his words. You could sense the confusion about how to fix this problem when the problem seems to be built into the very nature of the game. The statistics are damning for the Springboks. Makazole Mapimpi and Jasper Wiese both received 6-week suspensions for dangerous play in recent months. The team has accumulated red cards at an alarming rate despite being one of the most disciplined and well-coached sides in World Rugby. This isn't a team that plays dirty or recklessly. These are professional athletes who understand the importance of technique and safety. Yet they keep finding themselves on the wrong end of red card decisions. And the common denominator seems to be the height of their forwards. Lou de Jager's suspension following his red card against France compounds the problem. He received a 4-match ban, which means he'll miss the remainder of the Springboks European tour. The panel determined that his actions warranted a mid-range entry point because the tackle resulted in head and neck contact. De Jager couldn't get full mitigation because he didn't plead guilty, apparently attempting to contest the red card and have it rescinded. The veteran lock will miss crucial tests against Italy, Ireland, and Wales, a massive blow to the Springboks' depth in the second row. What's particularly frustrating for South African rugby fans and pundits is the perception of inconsistency. Springbok greats like Nick Mallett and Jacques Burger have slammed the decision to red card Franco Mostert, arguing that it was too harsh and didn't take into account the circumstances of the tackle. Others online have pointed out what they see as double standards, where similar incidents involving other teams result in yellow cards or no sanction at all. Whether the perception is accurate or not, it feeds into a growing sense that the Springboks are being unfairly targeted or that the officiating standards are impossible to understand and predict. Erasmus wrapped up his comments by acknowledging the difficulty of playing with 13 men at one point, as Italy also had a player yellow-carded during the match. He said it was tougher than the previous week against France, which is saying something considering how hard-fought that victory was. The coach expressed sadness that his captain had to suffer twice in 2 weeks for the team to secure wins. He called it unfair, and while he accepted the decisions as they stand, you could tell he believes the system needs to change. The debate over rugby's head contact laws has been raging for years, and it's not going away anytime soon. Player safety is paramount, and nobody disputes that dangerous tackles need to be punished, but there's a growing chorus of voices, with Erasmus now among the loudest, arguing that the current framework doesn't account for the realities of the game. When a 2-meter-tall lock is tackling a player who's already low or falling, physics and human biology create situations where head contact is almost unavoidable. No matter how good the technique is, World Rugby has introduced various measures to try to address this issue, including the global law trial allowing 20-minute red card replacements for certain fouls. But the implementation has been inconsistent across competitions, and the criteria for permanent versus temporary dismissals remain murky until there's clarity and consistency. Coaches like Erasmus will continue to find themselves in impossible positions, trying to teach their players to do something that might not be physically possible. The Springboks now turn their attention to Ireland in Dublin, a massive test against one of the top teams in the world.